Hey guys.
It's cold now, Jeff.
Yeah, for sure. Let me just get these lights on. All right, a little better, right? Yeah, it's cold. Legit cold. Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm jealous you two went on a walk.
Oh, Jeff, by the way, so we have a persimmon tree, and my mom, we have so many squirrels that try to get them. So she wanted to know if you wanted some. We could drop off like a basket of persimmons or something.
Sure, we'll eat them.
Okay.
I think we're going to see you tomorrow or Thursday.
Yeah, whenever you're available.
I haven't figured that out yet. I need to talk with my wife. She's working right now, but I can get back to you on that. And then Henry, we'll find a way to supplement so that you get your fill. On those walks, basically Steve, you want to fill him in on some of the stuff that we were talking about just so he doesn't feel left out?
Oh, yeah. Basically, I was just contemplating all my life choices for the future. And I guess, yeah, I mean, it is stressful, but I guess it's better to get rid of it now and just like what I want for my future in terms of my career, what I want in my future in terms of like my finances. Do they necessarily have to be intertangled? And just trying to think early of like, yeah, what I want from those goals and how I would define them now and what best steps I can take, I guess, to get to that point. But yeah.
You want to give them a sense of, I'm just pulling up today's meeting itinerary, so I have it ready. You want to give them a sense. One of the things I thought was really powerful about the walk that we did, we defined two problems that were on Steve's mind and try to decouple them. Do you want to say what those two problems were?
Yeah. What was the first one called? Like the financial, I forgot the word for it.
Independent. You want to be independent, right?
Yeah, the financial independence, like, because that's like one of the biggest things for me. Like, I don't want to, I mean, the sooner I can be financially independent and not be using my parents' money, that's a big thing for me. And then also a career building problem, just kind of defining what I want for my career and just all the things that come with that. So those are the two big ideas that we're trying to really nail down.
I think most people I really admire in my life do that type of thinking, Steve, that you're doing throughout their entire lives. And people who I feel have a hard time living a life that is filled with joy and balance are people who haven't thought really critically on those two things, right? I mean, whether it's financial, whether it's career trajectory. I've also heard in the past that you really want to be able to spend time with your loved ones, you know, like all of those things. Many people in my life, I don't think they've actually thought critically about how to design a life that will hit those marks. So it's like I bet Jeff, even to today, like he has projects that come up or conferences or ideas that he really has to think actively about his values to stay grounded and centered. So that type of thinking doesn't stop, and I'm so happy that you're starting it now.
Yeah, so we'll keep you posted on that. I think one thing that I've been thinking a lot about, Henry is really pushing us to find productive meeting times. And what I was trying to say last week that I didn't say very well is I don't want to lose the mentorship portion of this. But I think that if I can find ways to continue to mentor you guys in a space and time that makes sense, I don't mind outsourcing some of those conversations to not what I would call like the content creation portion of our meeting. The downside is that it means that not all of us would like, so if I talk with Henry individually or I talk to Stephen individually, or you guys talk together, like not all three of us are involved in those conversations. But I think from the standpoint of like content creation, I think one thing that I noticed last week was if we're serious about getting that done on a weekly basis, we've got to find other forums to do the mentorship. I don't want to lose that, but it's something that I want to start transitioning to a different forum so that when we're on these meetings, we can really focus in on the content creation portion. This is a question, not a statement, but I've just been brainstorming about the best way to like try to accomplish all the different goals.
I have found notes in the mentorship process that I know can be beneficial for my friends and other students, and I think that Healthy Gamer GG dude is doing that at a much larger scale, because he like finds, you know, influencers and people in the video game industry, and he literally gives them mentorship, right? Like counseling on the spot. And I don't think, you know, there's something to be said as far as the actual effectiveness of posting those videos of mentorship to the people who view those videos. And that's not so easy to measure, but so far I feel that how things have been going since the presentation date with the admin, there's still a good amount in each of these sessions that I don't feel like there needs to be urgent change as far as, you know, you finding time to mentor us and also think about producing videos. So I'm not too worried about it. But last time I had suggested that perhaps each one of us can bring one thing we want to present, teach, talk about into each and every single one of these meetings. And that was more of a reminder for myself to do a little more prep work, so that when I do either lead a discussion or present something, it's just more thought out. I think that was that note.
All right, and Steve, do you have a reaction to that, and then we can start reviewing today's agenda.
Or well, in terms of just like mentorship, or are you saying that you don't feel like you're giving us enough, or that you just wanted to separate it from what we're putting out there?
I want to make sure that, like, I guess what I feel is that we have what I would call ambitious agendas. So one question that I ask myself very often is, when I look at an agenda, am I able to accomplish that agenda? And so this reminds me of office hours. In office hours, it is very seldom that I'm able to quickly answer a student's question, because one of the things that happens inevitably is we not only talk about content questions, but we talk a lot about the process the students are working with. And so that's an introspective process that takes time to talk about. And I like to make sure to have that time of exploration with a student, right? And so in this situation, I would say, you know, for example, Steve, last week, there was a lot of back and forth to get to the place where I could understand what you were saying and then be able to like guide you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that was probably like 40 minutes of talk to get to a place where I was like, okay, there's like, I finally understood, like, oh, he's has two different things in mind, and the conclusion that he's making is conflating the two of them, right?
Okay.
But that, like, so I don't want to lose the capacity to have those type of conversations with you two, to meet you where you're at, et cetera. But the other side of that coin is that, you know, from the standpoint of like content creation or leveraging these discussions, you could give a 5-minute synopsis if you wanted to. I could do the same thing, right? I think it would be way more powerful for you, because it would be a recap of what we were talking about. It would get viewers up on that hour conversation, right? Like it would cover everything that we covered together in a succinct form, because you could be like, oh, by the end of our conversation, we saw 2 problems. Prior to our conversation, I was trying to solve both of them by making this conclusion. What we talked about was separating them into 2 separate problems. And I'm currently at the stage where I've defined this problem as this problem as that. I don't know where to go from there, but I have an open question. Our next conversation sometime this week, we will, right? And so from that standpoint, like, you know, we can still capture value for viewers. We can still, because that, you know, being able to identify those 2 problems and identify the components that you had, I think will resonate very deeply. But in order to get to that space took a lot of mentorship that I don't know that would be helpful. Like 5 minutes of conversation would accomplish 60 minutes of active thinking, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know in terms of for Henry, because you're not getting all that one-on-one time like I am with Jeff. So I think I'm in a luckier position. But I think that the way that we're doing things is I feel like I'm getting enough mentorship or at least to push me in the right direction.
But one thing that I'll say though is that Henry and I have spent, I mean, how many hours have we spent talking individually, Henry?
Hundreds, if not close to thousands.
Henry did, I mean, just like you did, but we did independent study in, like, so we started in January, and then you caught us in that conversation, you caught us in probably April, right? When we started to submit the SSEIG. Steve?
You guys had an independent study?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that, but I know me and you had an independent study.
Well, I know you and I had an independent study as well, but the independent study that we were talking about was not what, you know, Henry and I started talking about, you know, long-term vision goals well before we did that independent study, I think. But that was when we started doing it routinely on a weekly basis, multiple hours a week, right?
Yeah.
The independent study that you and I did really got that was designed to get to allow you to conquer college, right?
Yeah, that was just the study skills conquer college, like solve, I guess, my more immediate problems of trying to get good grades.
Yeah, and so when I think about like the flow of information or the flow of development as students, you guys are definitely beyond the. I mean, you have a very well conceptualized idea of the conquering college portion of it, both of you, and I think Henry has. If I were to ask him to describe what he wants to do and why, I think he spent a lot of time on the what I call from the classroom to the bank problem. Right. So if we broke up being a student, conquering college, get paid to learn, from the classroom to the bank, this one is like, I definitely think Henry has finished get paid to learn, right? When's the last time you got money from a scholarship, Henry?
Pretty recently.
Yeah, right. And so that's one thing that I want to do for you, Steve, which is we can talk about that together, right? Yeah. And then I also think Henry's pretty well developed on the from the classroom to the bank. He hasn't actually, like, I would ask you, Henry, have you landed in your dream position yet? No. Still working on it, right? But do you have a vision of what that is, and do you know why that vision makes sense for you, and are you working on it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so from that standpoint, Steve, like, you know, him and I also have go-betweens, right? Like we text individually, et cetera. And so, you know, in order for us to have the type of conversations that I think are really useful for you, I want to empower you to get to a space where you have really, really, you're kind of working through those next levels of development, right? And I think, and my claim here is like, you know, so when Henry is pushing us, if we're thinking about this model, right? So on the bottom is conquering college, the next one is getting paid to learn, and the next one is from the classroom to the bank. Henry is pushing us to produce content so that we can leverage that content in a career capacity, right? That is an iterative process for a vision of from the classroom to the bank, right? So like already transitioning into the career building phase. But the flip side though is that you, like Steve Silva, I believe that you have some of those elements for sure. But I also think that you're actively processing many of the features that go into that. And I think one of the major differences is, Henry, you're 28, you were born in
1992.
92. And then Steve, you're 23. So he's got 5 years of adult experience on you, in which he traveled to, I think, name the countries again.
Germany, China, and Philippines.
Right. And so like, I wouldn't, this is another example of like not using our immediate, Jeff Anderson, please don't compare yourself to a 50-year-old Japanese man when you've been there for 3 months, right?
Yeah.
Steve Silva, like, you know, if we all consider our adult life to start at 18, so now you're 23, so you've got 5 years of adult life. So Henry is exactly twice as old as you in his adult life, right? And he's leveraging all of that wisdom and experience in order to, I mean, and deep, you see how deep of a thinker he is, right? Just like you are. But I would just like, we're in separate stages. And so when one of the things that I'm hoping is that we as a team can support each of us in those different stages. But I don't want to one of the challenges that I've had is when we're in the content creation phase of answering the question, how do we go from the classroom to the bank in each of our lives? That's a very, very different goal than what are some of the features of learning how to get paid to learn and developing a vision for how I'm going to go from the classroom to the bank. The type of questions and the type of interactions are very different, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons that our meetings have been so full is because we're actually navigating different spaces simultaneously, right?
Okay.
Henry's vision is like I would say he is one of the most he has one of the most well-developed. He's able to articulate his vision for the classroom to the bank as strong as anybody I've ever met in my teaching career. And he also has an entrepreneurial spirit that pre-exists me ever meeting him. I think that's something that his mother, God bless her, right? And like we get to, one of the benefits for us is we're like really enjoying that on a daily basis. And I know those things are true about you too, Steve, but I also believe that you deserve the space and, capacity to like develop some of the other pieces of that, so that if and when you decide on whatever model you have for what you want to do with your future, it will be based on, deep thinking about all of the, rather than a flippant decision, right? And I think right now, one of the challenges is that when we're conflating the conversations about like, well, how do you get scholarships? Right? Like what scholarship you're going to go for next? Like, how do you, those type of conversations exist in the space of learning how to get paid to learn, and then developing a really, really good model of how you're going to transition out of your education into a paycheck. Whereas when we're trying to get content built on a daily basis, that actually pre-assumes that all of that stuff is in order. And then it's like leveraging that career path in order to, like, okay, I have that career path. Now let's actually like let's walk down it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I'm saying is like for you, Steve, like I think right now these meetings, I want, say it again.
I guess I'm still developing that path, so it's kind of hard to advance with like content building if I don't necessarily have like a clear vision, or I'm working on it, or some options at least. Yeah.
I think it's really hard in 75 minutes to do both, right? I think it's really, really hard. I think we can. In fact, you already are building content. That's not the claim, right? The claim is like, in addition to building content, I think you deserve a bunch of space to do this, and you already do it on your own. Right now, because of the structure of these meetings, we're trying to do both. We have like 3 different things going on, right? And what I'm saying is, if for our content creation meeting, let's center content creation, and then let's outsource conversations about the development of learning how to get paid to learn and the career development to a different space. And we can cross-pollinate, right? We can bring those conversations into the content creation, and we can use the content creation to drive some of those conversations. But the statement is, I believe you deserve that capacity, and I think we can build it. But one of the challenge that I see is that right now we're trying to do everything in 75 minutes.
Okay.
Can you repeat back to me what you heard and kind of?
So basically, you think, or it could be more wise to just outsource like that mentorship, that one-on-one or specific mentorship about get the phases of like getting paid to learn and from the classroom to the bank, to outside of these meetings, I guess. I mean, we can sometimes like weave them back in, but I guess we should try to center these more on the content creation, because I mean, it is hard to do. I mean, both of them are such consuming tasks, but trying to do both might not be as efficient as trying to focus on one during the meeting and then one outside of the meeting.
Yeah, and the really kind of fun thing about that is that the work, one of the claims that I'm going to make. Do you notice that Henry leverages so many of his for people in his professional network to get guidance. Like, it's not, you know, he's really kind to me in the sense that I feel so lucky to, Henry, that you let me spend time with you every week, right? But if I asked him, like, I actually see, I mean, he networks me with his advisors, right? Like that podcast you sent the other day, I listened to, like, the, you know, the guy's like a magnet, right? Like, it's really cool to be around in that way. It reminds me of grad school, right? Do you see that? I see that too. And I'm not as worried in terms of, like, I think, Henry, I would ask you, Henry, when you need help from me, or when you need guidance, or et cetera, do you feel you can ask me that?
Yes.
For the most part, you know, I think you're really respectful of my time, but, like, I have full faith that, like, he's navigating his education in a way that aligns with a vision of his, and that he is like a magnet for information associated with those tracks, right? And I have faith in you as well, Steve, but I do recognize that many of the experiences that Henry had prior to this year feed into that, and you're still, like, 5 does not equal 10, no matter how hard you work, right? Like, just you could try, but. And so from that standpoint, like, I just want to be able to meet you both in those spaces, right? Not one is not better than the other. They're just different spaces in development, right?
Yeah.
And I would claim, like, the conversations we're going to have will actually directly feed back in the content creation. And we'll talk more about that on our walk. But, like, I could imagine you giving a 5-minute synopsis of the conversation that we had, and it would be super powerful for viewers and for you in the future, right?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so let's keep that open. Should we move back to the okay? Does that sound?
Yeah. Just 2 quick comments before we move to the agenda item of last week's to-dos, because that was really exciting and fun to do last week's to-dos. My favorite, and I think also society's favorite, entrepreneurs are educators. So as much as my mom is cool in term entrepreneurial spirit, right? Like carrying 100-pound product samples from design trade shows across the country to go into trailers at construction sites to sell that design is a very different spirit than the spirit that educators are doing right now, right? So I see so many similarities. And the second comment I wanted to make is part of the reason why I've been pushing Jeff to go public is I realize his mentorship is really powerful and unique. And, you know, as I mentioned last meeting, Jeff's been extremely generous to us. Wouldn't you say so, Steve?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And if I think about that, you know, the advice that he's given us and the counsel he's given us, that there's value in documenting that. So that's all I'll say.
I hope, I mean, you all are the one walking through it, but I would love to be part of the team that helps you get your first $100,000. That would make me, like, that would be awesome. You know, like, you're the one that does it ultimately, right? But, like,
I think Steve and I checked in on this idea of the $2,000 paycheck we got for the grant, and I feel we haven't, personally, I feel like I haven't fully delivered on that $2,000 yet. So as far as, you know, getting paid for the work that we do, I'm excited because it's really just the beginning.
yeah, one thing that I'll say, and we can go back, but what I do think, you actually you remind me of a woman named Rachel. I should probably not use her last name. There's a woman that I met early in my teaching career called Rachel. That woman got, like, she went to one of my scholarship things, and I don't know if it was me or she had it. I think she had it already, but, like, from the day that I met her in the scholarship thing until, like, a year later, she got, like, 9 scholarships. I was like, oh my God, you and that woman are at Foothill College when I think about that. And there's one guy, he was there as well. There was one guy, he was not, I did not have direct influence in his life. So I met him once, and then I saw him a few years later, and he ended up doing that same thing. And so I think he had his own, like, Katie Ha was really involved in that. But, like, you know, I think one of the things that's really powerful, Henry, is you took that. I mean, I think you had that already in your own life, but you took that message and you've done it, right? Like, have you shared with Steve a list of scholarships with amounts that you've gotten?
No.
Could you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Could you, if you have a list, you know, that can be privately, you don't have to, you could do it online too if you want to do that. I would tend not to put that out there. But if you could just give him a list of the names of the scholarships that you got along with the amounts, and they could be, if there's no amounts, I think that would be really helpful.
Sounds good.
Because I'd like, you know, who the next protege is in that mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I want that to happen sooner rather than later. Like if we, you know, here's the test for you, Steve. You said you could graduate by spring 2022, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we could get you to have enough scholarship money that you could pay a full year of tuition after that, before you go on to grad school, so that your last year of Davis would be fully funded by scholarships. That would be a nice control. That would be a nice, that would help maybe make that decision, right? So we'll talk more about that later, but you want me to take over timestamping, Henry?
No, not at all. This is
You taught me so much, man. Like, I love those timestamps. Freaking awesome.
Oh, that stuff, yeah. No, the comment I left, the fact that I was able to follow your video, I was talking more just from a teaching standpoint, not the actual, not because.
But that's a huge point, anyways, though. Like, the timestamps are powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks.
But the thing about, like, in your actual physical classes, Jeff, like, you leave so much room for thought and curiosity, right? So it's not like, even if a teacher were to go into the lesson plan fully time-stamped, like, leaving room for questions and stuff, that's something that you did. I mean, you did that like every 5 minutes, I would say. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay, anyway. All right. Is everyone good with the next item, which is going over the writing that potentially we've done about the questions to clarify motivation? And at the bottom of the doc, I have it. I copied it over. Awesome. So one of the questions was, what is your motivation for getting involved with the learning code? And the second question is, what do you hope to achieve through online video? Steve, you want to?
Yeah. Can I actually just run to the bathroom real quick, and then I have my response and I can just share it right away.
Sounds good. Jeff, during the keynote today, or not keynote, the webinar, Amy Baldwin, so cool. She's been writing a lot, and she's taught at community colleges for like 18 years.
Who is she? I recognize the name.
She's written a few books on community college success, like student success. And then that college success book that OpenStax published last year, she was the senior author.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
I know.
How old is she?
I'm not sure. But she's serious with writing, clearly.
That's really cool. So tell me what happened again? How'd you meet her?
Well, Symphony is one of the, probably part of the marketing team, but OpenStax has an entire team of like neuroscientists and machine learning algorithm people that, design their textbooks and activities so that to improve the learning experience. But she was going to be a keynote speaker at the Creator Fest that got canceled. And I think she read some of my work that I did with OpenStax, and she was like, it'd be cool to do a little webinar with Henry. But we both had a really big laugh when I was channeling what you had shared with me a while back, which is real change happens when classroom sizes are smaller and I get individualized time. And then what she said immediately after is like, I hope if there's any administrators on this webinar, they might take that into account when they're thinking about budgeting. Because it
actually goes above that's voters, right? That's the pay grade for those type of decisions aren't admin. That actually is straight for the voters, right?
I see. Yeah, I don't know too much about it. But yeah, it's we were talking a little bit about like algorithms and like machine learning algorithms. This entire book is about algorithms and like how much funding algorithms get. It's like, but the one of the most important algorithms are the teachers in my classrooms. Like the amount of problems they're freaking solving in a classroom with 30 or 100 students.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous. Like how do these startup companies with these patented algorithms get millions of dollars when my teachers are like living 2 hours away? And I've worked with adjuncts that work at 3 campuses. Yeah. Anyways. Okay.
racism intersecting capitalism. School funding.
Dude, that guy's podcast was so legit. That the
That
one
was
on
pretty awesome.
holy cow.
All right, so let's should we the big slugger, Babe Ruth, right here.
Okay, yeah, Steve. You want to start off with number 1 or 2? Either.
So that was the motivation for getting involved with the learning code.
Sure.
Yeah, so I had written, so basically I feel for me, my answer would be like, I know I'm pretty lucky to have run into you and Jeff and kind of just like help me navigate through higher education. So like, I think we've already created this platform to kind of record and pass on this knowledge. I mean, we're still working on it and every day it gets better, and just documenting our experiences, especially in the planning phases of how Jeff already has it laid out. So like the Conquering College, which I think I don't know if, I can always improve in that step, but I feel like I'm like starting to leave that step and trying to get into the get paid to learn, and eventually from the classroom to the bank. And especially I think if I could do it, so just documenting my story as like non-traditional student, like me right now being like 2.0 something GPA, like having been academically dismissed, like a Latino, like going to Foothill, like commuting from an hour away. Like I think if I could show that like someone like me could do it, then someone else could way easily more do it. So that it's like not intimidating at all. And then with the question, like, what do you hope to achieve through the online video? I mean, I think just capturing the stories is a little bit easier, or sometimes it's just more consumable through video or whether it's the stories or the study skills, compared to just like blogs and written pieces. I mean, I think when you have a blog and a written piece, it's important because you spend a lot more time planning it out and writing it out. But I think it's good to have both, and especially documenting the story as we go through it right now. Like me, I don't know like what's going to happen in my life 2 years from now, but just me capturing like my struggles, my doubts and everything is kind of like going to be more receptive for students rather than me, say 5 years successful CEO or something and like preaching to the choir or preaching to students like, yeah, do this, this, and this, and you'll be like me, because I don't think they would ever be able to imagine themselves in this position. But maybe if I document myself along the entire transition and then they see like, oh, wow, he actually got through it, then maybe I can do it too. So, and then also just in our meetings, there's a lot of gems, and being able to capture those and having the possibility to at least put it out there if we want to, just having that option, I think is really cool. So yeah, that's what I hope to achieve through the online video as well.
Awesome.
All right, so Babe Ruth just went, and now Barry Bonds.
It's so hard to answer to both of these questions in 30 seconds or so, but I'll do my best. My motivation with the learning code stems from this idea that really was kind of ignited during that activity that you led us to do, Jeff, in your multivariable calculus course, which was the mind being a muscle. I'm sure I've heard of this a little bit. It's definitely not in our dominant mainstream media, but the idea that our brain is a muscle. But just doing that writing activity in your math course and then having a brief discussion about it kickstarted this idea that like, hey, even though I've always thought that I'm not really good with school, specifically STEM concepts, I can get a little bit better if I just chip away at it. So that is, I would say, a pretty big primary motivation, right? That our intellect is not fixed as long as we work on it and as long as we're deliberate and intentional about improving. we can get better at just about everything. Let's see. One other note of the motivation standpoint is I noticed that having conversations with many students who have A's, I would say many of them also have little consciousness of what, why, how they're learning. And then for all the other students, which is like 90% of students, they haven't even figured out how, what, why to learn yet, right? And that's fundamentally different than getting a grade and graduating or dropping out. So the sooner we can help students distinguish what it means to learn, what it means how to learn, why bother doing so, they'll have some skills at their back pocket to use. Before I answer the second question, Jeff, maybe you want to
share? Oh, I will. I would go. Keep going. Keep going. I promise I'll do the whole thing.
Okay. Okay. Well, through video, at this stage, having seen many videos, YouTube has been like, I don't know, I've watched so many YouTube videos over the last 7 years. But at this point, I feel that even in these meetings, there are ways for us to highlight our stories and our voices that contain these 7 ideas here, that can be catchy, like have a really tight lead, that can be strategically entertaining. So like we want to inform, we want to help students like demystify this thing called learning, but also like not lecture them to death. So serious, but not so serious. I think we can make our videos funny, therefore more memorable. I'm not sure if you saw Hassan's one of his testimony in Congress. I thought it was like pretty effective, like not just for me, but even the people at that in Congress, right? For our videos to be factual, authentic, right? Evidence-based and shareable. I think there have already been many clips that even in this past couple months that I know hit all 7 of these points. So that is really exciting to be able to turn meeting into content. And I've also, last note is on the WordPress. Originally, I had thought when I share a YouTube link that is, for example, 30 minutes, and I wanted to start at the 20-minute mark, that when I embed it onto WordPress, it won't start at the 20-minute mark, but now it does start at the 20-minute mark. So that's good news for us to make use of our longer form videos.
I want to, those 7 points you just said, I want to capture. I'm so glad you wrote them down. So when I think about my motivation for getting involved with the learning code, you two are living examples of that. When in my capacity as an instructor, I work with too many students per quarter. So 120 students a quarter, 360 a year about. And one of the things that I really want to do is to create significant learning experiences in my students' lives. And I use LD Fink's mechanism for that. So the whole LD Fink in his book, there's a great book on this subject for those.
You got it, Jeff. I got it.
Oh, you got it. Yep. You got it. So creating significant learning experiences. At some point, we'll get you a copy of this, Steve. I don't know if I have an extra copy. I think I used to. One of the things that he talks about is a model of learning that actually takes into consideration different, what you might call dimensions of student life. Are you able to see this? What are you looking at right now?
Looking at your entire desktop, but the centerpiece. Yeah.
Okay.
I think you just dragged it out of the desktop.
Oh, okay. Do you see that centerpiece that it says the different?
Yes, the categories.
Okay. So in my classes, one of the things that I think a lot about for content is foundational knowledge. So information and ideals, having students actually build that in their mind of whatever topic we're studying. So for Math 1C, that's multivariable differentiation and a little bit of sequences and series. I also think a lot about how to get students, how to apply the knowledge. So this is something in mathematics where I'm actually trying to make connections between the mathematical knowledge and the applications that are directly related to the student's career and academic interests. That also includes, I mean, integration is kind of interesting. That's a form outside of that. But one of the things that I think a lot about is learning how to learn and caring. So when I'm working with students, I think I would be failing my students if the only thing that I do is create content that is focused on foundational knowledge and application. More specifically, I would actually say that the most important thing on this whole chart is learning how to learn, because if a student knows how to learn and they have a compelling reason for why they want to learn, everything else is theirs for the taking, right? So that is a working assumption that I go into my classes with. But one of the things that's really difficult is that our current system is not designed really under the assumption that I'm going to do this for my students, right? And meaning that, you know, I only have a certain number of hours per week, and learning how to learn is a process that spans months, if not years, if it's done well, right? So the college mechanism was to create a repository of information that is, you know, science-based and that empowers students to be able to build those skills. One of the things that I was missing, though, is a broader perspective, right? And so when I think about why I'm motivated to do this, it basically comes down to the same mission that I had when I was doing Conquering College work, which was creating a foundation, a platform upon which students can access information that is directly relevant to their ability to learn deeply, anytime, anywhere. And the thing that I was trying to do, the thing that I feel really confident or really motivated, I guess would be the word, is to leverage many of the science results in scientific theory on learning with a gaze in critical race theory. So to be able to really critique the system while helping students navigate it. I guess, you know, I was just showing Henry this the other day. These are types of emails I get probably once a quarter. I don't know. This is an email from a student that I met a few years ago. I'm not going to put his name in here because he hasn't given me permission to use it, but I don't know if you can read that. Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah. This past June, I was able to graduate summa cum laude, which is top honors from UCI Biochemical Engineering with honors, and I received the Chancellor's Award, top 0.4% of graduates, recognition, academic achievement. And then this is it, right? Because none of this would have been possible without your guidance. I never realized that people could learn how to learn, and I'm convinced that you should start a YouTube channel. This makes me laugh. I'm so dedicated to helping students transform themselves into lifelong learners that are not only able to learn as much as they want, but also excel, right? And you two are, in my opinion, you two are this is documentation from one person. You two are right in this realm, right? Of people who are leveraging those lessons to be able to make, you know, to create the life that you want to live. And every time I get a message like this, what I realize is that has to be a fundamental component of my teaching career. And it's not, right now I'm doing the YouTube video creation because I want to allow students to do learning in class. But what that does is it outsources so many of the lessons on metacognitive analysis to other forums. And so this is the other forum by which we capture so many of the lessons of how to become a lifelong learner so that other people can share it, right? A major portion of that is the working relationship between the three of us, for sure, like no doubt about that, right? So the motivation really lies in the concept of empowering our viewers, empowering our audience members to become what I might call a professional learner. Somebody that gets paid to learn, right? And that doesn't necessarily imply anything other than becoming a learner by habit, right? You could get paid to learn at In-N-Out. You can get paid to learn at a garbage, you know, working garbage, sewage. You can get paid to learn at construction. You can get paid to learn in mathematics. It doesn't, there's no there's no judgment on the decision that's made other than just like becoming a critical thinker. In terms of what do I hope to get out of online video, I would really like to learn how to create community and learn how to achieve, I'm sorry. So I would love to create highly valuable videos that our audience find valuable. I'd like to create stuff that like saves people energy and time. So the way I always think about this is, if I could go back and teach myself what I know now, I'd be like the coolest 18-year-old ever. You know, I would be like, so many things would have been different. And I think one of the travesties of our education system, you've heard me say this multiple times, is we force students to recreate the wheel for every single student because we don't actually address these fundamental learning needs systemically in our system. And so one of the things that I would like our videos to do is to create a platform that students can quickly get integrated into that immediately solve many of the problems of being a student in a way that empowers those students to become the best versions, you know, the most healthy versions of themselves is what I mean to say. Not the best, it's not a hierarchy, but like, you know, they're able to achieve the goals that they want and learn what they want to do while taking care of themselves and being honest, being their full person, right? Without sacrificing many of the features of their character that are usually required to be sacrifices in the education system that we currently have. So if I could get that into a 30-second elevator pitch, it would go something like this. I'm motivated to help my students and our viewers become professional learners, people that get paid to learn anything that they want. And I want to leverage online videos to create compelling, intriguing, and valuable online content that allows students to develop those professional learning skills anytime, any place that they'd like to do it.
And Jeff is currently doing that through his MATLAB series that he's posting once a day and once every 2 days, actually.
Yeah, that particular one. So if we go back to the model of the of significant learning, those videos, can you see this now, right?
Yes.
Okay, those videos really focus on foundational knowledge and application. They are not as much focused on learning how to learn. In fact, I've outsourced almost all conversations of learning how to learn. There's some meta-analysis there for sure, but this is in the background and this is central. So I would say that the three of us, I'm hoping that as we build content, we're really going to be focused on learning how to learn. And then the caring dimension and the human dimension, I think, are also, I guess all three of those would be the learning code, right? Like if I were to think about like what we're doing, we're doing learning how to learn, we're developing a platform by which we can care for each other. And then we're really inviting ourselves first and foremost, but anybody in our audience to really learn about themselves and learn about other people as a mechanism to becoming a professional learner, right? Yeah, I guess the other thing that I would say about professional learning, it's a weird word, right? Professional learning, that's a weird phrase. But if I were to think about a professional athlete, I would imagine those professional athletes could describe in glorious detail many of the aspects of their performance, no? Like they are conscious of what they're doing to perform, and they have many, many systems in place to reflect on, modulate, and change aspects of their performance that affect their profession. And that's what I mean by a professional learner, somebody that has the capacity to, with coaching and individually, reflect on and change aspect of their learning to leverage their learning to accomplish whatever they want to accomplish in their life, right? So literally using learning as a foundation to become a full, to realize your full humanity.
like in the way that athletes have film that they can review, we as students kind of have our notes over the years that have changed. We have test corrections. We have maybe the documentation that we keep from office hours. We have our binders just in general, and see how, because I know like my binders from last year are completely different from my binders 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I didn't even have a binder. I just had a bunch of loose papers. At one point, even in Davis, I had been taking notes on Post-it notes. I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't have a learning system. It was the dumbest thing ever. But I don't know what else. But yeah, so just documenting that growth and reflecting on it.
Yeah, and becoming reflective, right? Like you are now able to you're able to say out loud why it is that you, and if I asked you right now, could you identify potential weaknesses in the current binding system that you're using and things that you want to improve the next time around?
I'd have to look over my binder, but as far as for me, it's about the pre-lecture stuff that I try to do. Don't really have a good place for storing that, and because I kind of failed to keep up with it. Yeah.
That's a right. Like did you see that?
Yeah.
Just like if I asked Steph Curry, what do you like about your 3 points? What are some things that you're struggling with right now? I guarantee you to have that same answer, right?
Yeah. And I guess this skill is just important because, I mean, even beyond just learning and education, once you become a professional, you always have to be learning on the job, or at least that's what a lot of my friends have said, that it never ends. You're just always learning new things. So it's important to at least have that skill developed.
For us, I don't think there's any other way for the current reality of our world. Like if we were in a world of assembly lines, maybe this would be different. But for the information age, I think no longer are we limited to information is still a commodity, but like a rare resource, like good information anyways. But I think the longer our world goes on, the more value there is in becoming a professional learner and learning how to learn things, right? And being really conscious of it. If you can do that, you'll have access to things that if you can't do that, you won't have access to. So one thing that I would love to do, maybe should we wrap up this piece and go on to the next one?
Yeah. What were you going to say, Jeff?
I was going to say, I would love so we now have a sense of the 3 of our motivations for this, right? It would be, this, if Catherine and Lee wanted to be part of this would be a good time to do it because we're about to develop a plan, so to speak, right? So what would be really nice, and we can talk about that next week, obviously, but would be really nice is to start to sync these into a concise plan that all of us drafted. Everybody that's involved in this and committed to it for the next certain number of years, like each of us had a creative contribution to that. And then we can eventually, when we have that plan in a working draft mode, this is like -1 draft. Like it's not even a 0th draft, right? Like I eventually will get into like a second draft mode that is just, that we can return to as many times as we want and update, but it's like, it has a good working core of what we're thinking. At that point, I think we can then use that draft as a mechanism to make decisions on what we're going to do on a daily basis. So one thing that I would say is we've just now got our -1 draft of the ideal answers for those. And I don't know if we want to start crafting a document or if we want to go on. I don't know how we want to do the workflow because there's like a bunch of questions that we have, right? One thing that I would recommend for us is let's go, instead of doing all the questions and then coming back, I might recommend that we've now got our 0th draft version of questions, or is it -1 draft version of questions 1 and 2, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe what we can do is start to compose a single document that the three of us work on with our group answer to that. And then we'll put constraints on that document that they're short and succinct, right?
Okay.
One thing that I'll say is that I have already done a lot of this writing on my own. You guys, I think, are doing a lot of writing now. I might recommend maybe each of you sponsor one of those and give me editing rights. Because I think one of the things that if I take the writing process on, I'm doing the creation again, right? But if you guys take the writing process on, you're creating the vision for those individually based on the responses that you've heard. And then I can put my input in so that and I would say when you're writing, like really focus on what you heard and then also what you want yourself, right?
Yeah.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I mean, your blog post on the mission on our WordPress is number one.
Yeah, but I would say that like all of that's negotiable, right? The moment that we went into, like, if in fact, I think I remember one of them that still needs to be changed on that blog post, which is the number 5, maximize the financial return. Mm-hmm. I agree with your critique wholeheartedly, and I actually think that needs to be changed, right? And so like all of those are negotiable. If you said to me, like, we do not want to help students meet people on their campus, I would give pushback, but we could still negotiate it, right? Like,
got it. Okay. Steve and I will chat about, we'll create a document and start drafting the next draft.
Maybe Henry, do you want to take number 2?
Yeah.
You repeat that. Henry, I would really like you to do number 2.
Mm-hmm. And I'll try to highlight some examples of meetings we've done where we hit a minimum of these 7 notes. Like, I'm not like, the reason I say that we have 2 to 6 minute clips from our meetings that have hit 1 to 7 is I've actually received feedback from my friends that are like, holy cow, this is kind of cool. I mean, most of them know you, Jeff, but a few don't. And they're like, wow, that's so, I want to be like, even if the outcome is, man, I want to find a professor that's like Jeff. Well, actually there are professors that are student-centered at each and every one of these institutions, right? So if that is a motivator for them to go to office hours, that's a win for us anyway.
Big time. Yeah.
So, okay. Yes, I will sponsor number 2.
Awesome. And then maybe that means Steve, which is really apropos, right? Because you're actually doing a lot of deep thinking on that. Yeah. Steve, is it okay if I say this? Maybe you want this title too, but like when all things online video, Henry's like my guru. Like, do you want that? Do you want that title too? Do you want to be the guru?
Yeah. No, I'll let Henry. Henry's like, what do you always say? 5 steps ahead of the teacher, 5 steps ahead of the class.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's like 70 steps ahead of me for sure, man. And I'm not even walking. I'm just like holding on to his cape, you know?
Steve, there has been at least 5 videos I forwarded you over the last 6 months where you saw what I saw. That Prospect MD dude that talks about how he learns for his medical school. The first moment I forwarded you Healthy Gamer GG, I was like, dude, what's stopping us from doing what the heck this dude's doing? And right? So you see it too. You know that.
Yeah, the point of that though was like, as Ali G would say, respect.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
So did we get those ones?
Yeah.
Or a better question, anything else there?
No, that was pretty amazing. I don't fully feel too tied to number 4 and 5 at the moment. I would like to, we should probably spend a minimum of 5 minutes talking about the to-dos because that gets the ball rolling for what we're going to do for the next 7 days. So that leaves us, 10 minutes and I don't want to take over. I do have a clip, a podcast clip queued up that should be about 2 minutes on of an author by the name of Paul Tough. He talks about how college makes or breaks us. So that is ready, but I do want to give both of you a chance to share anything that is not on the agenda, because the agenda is simply an agenda.
I mean, I know that what I have to do for this week, and I'd really like to do so I'm going to write my next blog post, and that's going to be finishing, that's going to be finishing the last one, which is track your goals, part 2 of last post on goals. And then I really want to get in the habit of making videos, and I want to decrease those MATLAB videos or any of the videos that I've made where I've been in production mode are really, really high intensity videos. And I love that, but I also think that I've already done so much of the prep work on my a lot of the systems here that I don't have to I'd like to find ways to capture the essence in video in a way without having to spend 10 hours of prep work, right? And so that's one of the goals that I have, see if I can get a video for Horizons of Focus that demonstrates what I'm talking about, how I use it. So that's for me, that's what the remainder of that form of the agenda. Is there something else you think I should do?
No, I think you're doing more than enough for this project. For me, I will begin a second draft of what we hope to achieve through our video, specifically what we can do during our meeting times. And then I'll do some prep work for, I like to quote unquote teach you all something next time, something that's interesting and relevant to the work that we're doing here.
Dude, Henry really raised the bar on that last blog post, man. He was like 3,000 words or something like that. I was like, damn, Henry.
I thought it was pretty scattered, but
I thought it was, we'll get there. We'll get there. The fact of the matter is you wrote a lot, man. That was
yeah. I've been reflecting on that actually, which is if I were to do that type of documentation for the concepts my teachers are expecting me to learn, I can really expand on these concepts, because there was each paragraph I wanted to actually expand on, right? But what's stopping me to have that type of mentality towards, I don't know, the concept and theory of computation? It's the same. It really is quite similar in that sense.
Time's a big one though, right? Time.
Yeah.
Just being able to setting aside the time to be able to do that exploration. But yes, assuming that you have the time to do it, yes.
Awesome. Steve, do you want to verbalize what you have planned for the next week?
As far as just having hopefully a written piece on just the number one, so my motivation for being part of the learning code, but I think I kind of want to push myself to maybe even have a video on the subject. I know it's a little bit more ambitious, but I think maybe do it.
The advice that Jeff just gave me, time. If you schedule out the time, you'll position yourself for success.
I feel like I just need to get the ball rolling of making videos, not worrying about necessarily what they look like, but I mean, with each video that comes out, I'm sure that they'll just get 1% better, and eventually they'll be good. Just worry too much about how starting, I guess.
Yeah, ditto. Me too.
It's a good thing we have Henry here. Pushes this.
Yes, for sure. Yes. Cheers to that.
Okay. Jeff, anything you'd like to speak to? Because otherwise, I think I'll just go ahead and play that 2-minute clip, and then we can talk about it before you go. Okay, so I'm gonna try this again. Last time was an epic fail, Newport's thing. So
I thought that was awesome, dude. I thought that was so cool.
You thought it was cool? I think I was trying to save time, so I played it at one point.
Yeah, I played at normal speed. Play it at normal speed if you can.
Okay.
I thought it was so cool that you were trying this.
Mm-hmm. I actually was going to feature your video of the making a community, engaging with the MATLAB community, because that's actually a really big one as far as learning how to learn. Like, that idea is not there at all in any of my CS courses, but we'll save it for next time. Okay, so this is an author, Paul Tuff, was introduced to me by my professor, Cynthia Rosenkowski, like 2 years ago. And I've read a few of his articles, but this was the first podcast of his that I came across from the podcast called Curious Minds. So I'll go ahead and play this segment. It's his viewpoints on the college ethos. Oh, I actually don't think I shared my sound. Give me one moment. Share computer sound. Okay. If you don't hear anything when I hit play, just signal or say something.
Of additional programs to increase their sense of belonging and give them extra resources to stay on track. So it was very intuitive. I think a lot of what he did, I mean, some of it was based in science, but a lot of it was pretty intuitive. But one of the things that strikes me, I do think we can learn more, and I do think, studying these different interventions is a good idea. But it was striking how much sort of common sense and sort of human kindness is involved in helping students stay on track. That a lot of students, it's this combination when you're a low-income student at a demanding institution where you have, you've got academic troubles, you've got financial troubles, you often have, troubles at home with your family. There's just crises happening in the community where you left. It all feels like one big problem, right? It just feels like your life is out of control. You can't possibly persist. But when somebody is able in that moment to like reach out and try and help you solve those individual problems, it has two effects. One is you can actually solve those problems. So if you're not doing, if you're not passing your calculus class, there's a way that a tutor can help you pass that calculus class. If you, need $500 in order to, afford books for that semester, there are ways that you can get a quick loan for $500 that will get you through that semester. But just as important as that practical help is this sort of feeling of being wanted that I think a lot of college students, and especially low-income college students, don't get to experience. I think there's this ethos that a lot of universities have, this kind of sink or swim ethos, where like we're not supposed to baby these college students too much. They're just supposed to, we're supposed to toughen them up and see how much they can put up with, and that's who we really want graduating from our college. And what these administrators are saying is like, no, that's not who we want graduating from our college. Like, it's good for students to learn some independence, but like the way for them to learn independence is not just to see how much pain they can take, it's to help guide them through these challenges. College is challenging enough that helping students in those moments of crisis is not going to weaken them. It's only going to make it more likely that they're going to succeed. So when colleges, I think, change that sort of central ethos, that central idea of what the role of a college is, and when they decide part of our role is helping our students succeed and graduate, it really changes the way a university operates.
In recent,
I think you all can see why I queued that clip up, and I already hear all 4 of my professors this semester, and I actually feel this, and I genuinely believe this, that they are absolutely giving me an opportunity and a chance to learn this material and to graduate, no doubt in my mind. But on a contrary note, when I hear, for example, a professor say, I will not upload lecture notes because when I've done that in the past, the performance of my students is not so good. The level of thought that went into that decision-making, like if students' lives were petri dishes, we wouldn't come to those conclusions or judgments about the biology and the chemistry that's in that petri dish simply from an experience, an anecdote, or a term. So anyways, I thought what he said was pretty strong.
Yeah, to sum that up in one sentence, the plural of anecdote is not data.
Or causation does not mean correlation, or is it the other way around?
Correlation.
No, the other way around. Or that, right? Yeah. So.
Steve, you want to take this one first? Wait, maybe Henry, you should take it first because you brought it to us.
Well, this semester has been a really hard one, and time again, I think about what Mr. Tough here is saying. His surname is ironic because he's actually not being tough here, because the colleges are being tough, right? And I completely get it. I've shared this experience with both of you. My first internship at a tech company, within the first week, I got dropped a ton of resources on my desk, and I was literally told to self-study this before I can engage in the cloud team in my internship. So in that regard, even my professors who are most out of touch provide more guidance in terms of lesson planning, curriculum, assignments, and exams, administrating exams to help my learning. So I completely get it. I get the idea of let's toughen these students up. We want to prepare them for industry. We want to leave a good reputation for San Jose State. But I would just say, before I pass it to Steve, like, sometimes we just got to slow it down. And before we can toughen these people up, we might actually get to think of ways to create psychologically safe spaces to get to know, like, why is it that I only have half the class turn in this assignment? Or why is it that not everyone can meet my expectations? And to simplify that to just, oh, their lives are complicated, or they're working, or they're not taking their college seriously enough, is a devastating simplification to those results. Okay, Mike, passing the mic, Steve.
I just thought it was kind of funny. Actually reminds me, or the part when he's talking about how much pain they can handle. And it kind of reminds me of like how many STEM students, and even me in the past, kind of just ignorantly, like, we would look down toward like non-STEM students, so like, it's so easy and everything. And like, I guess we associate like the glory of being a STEM major with how much like pain. It's like, oh, if you're not crying every night, then it's not a real major. It's like, oh, you're not depressed all day studying. And it's like, why do we want that for ourselves? Like, we've been conditioned to think that that's a good education. I'm like, let's think about that. Let's break that down. Why is that? So that's what I thought of.
At some point in the past, I've researched the psychology of substance abuse. We had, in my family way back when, we had alcoholics, and in UCSB was definitely not a alcohol-free campus. And so I had to actually think pretty critically about that when I was judging my own use of alcohol as a college student. I was surrounded by people that drank a lot, et cetera. And I remember reading at that point, one of the patterns of substance abuse was what I saw my parents do, or what I saw my family do, I then recreate, because I haven't actually processed the psychological pain surrounding that habit. And so I look to that coping mechanism as the way in which I will engage in my life, right? Like, it's almost as if when I choose to use alcohol, I'm doing that because it was the path of least resistance, right? So I still have a lot of psychological healing that I need to do in order to make the decision, to be able to notice that that habit is not good for me, and then to make the decision not to implement that habit, but instead to build new habits on top of that, right? That process of teaching psychological, the psychological coping mechanisms for substance abuse reminds me of the process that goes in college teaching, which is the college teachers are usually the cream of the crop of the last generation, right? So if we think about how people get hired, they go through a system, and then eventually they matriculate, they get their degrees, and then they go out for a job. Well, who are the people that get the jobs at these institutions? Those are the people that literally get through this system, right? And not only they get through it, but they're the cream of the crop, so to speak, right? Well, just as a person that survives an alcoholic mother or father gets through and then immediately might fall into the trap of using alcohol to numb the pain of life, so too an academic that gets through this system rises to the top, and then it's their turn to turn. They're going to turn to many of the psychologically damaging teaching practices as a background, because that's what they saw. And the system itself is supported. This reminds me of the larger family dynamic. In the alcoholic's case, this analogy would be the entire family buys alcohol and gives it to them as gifts, right? And then when they get together on Friday nights and they see each other, everybody in the whole family is drinking and like, come on, come on. So it's a system in which basically to support that habit. And then over in academia, one of the ways that we propagate this broken system is that the entire mechanism, from administrators to funding to academic tenure, all of that mechanism is basically designed in such a way that critical reflection on the component of teaching is in the adverse interest, economic interest of the actors in the system, right? And so it ends up that it is actually most natural for a teacher to recreate that system of abuse, the least useful mechanisms of teaching and learning that they actually experience in their own classes. It's just easier to adopt those and then come up with narratives in their mind why those are useful. And so like that's one thing that comes up for me. And I just, I cannot per se, I'm okay on time, by the way, that the next one is canceled. So I cannot per se judge those people, because if I look at them as rational actors, if I look at any instructor as a rational actor, they're doing the rational thing. They're doing what they should do, right? What Paul Tough is saying there, though, is that perhaps, maybe, we should investigate our underlying assumptions on what the college system is designed for, and actually, when we recognize some of the weaknesses, we should, instead of filling those with coping mechanisms that were created in absence of guidance about what good teaching and learning means, maybe, just perhaps, we should fill those in. We should do some use our very high-powered brains as content experts to do some investigation to come up with better mechanisms by which we can support our students. Maybe we should break the cycle of abuse and suffering in our own classes. And this is where I would say that personnel is policy. This gets back to one of the major functions of lawmaking. A law is just a law. A law is just a set of words. The way that law gets implemented really is how the policy works out. Ezra Klein had a great podcast just recently, within the last maybe 2 weeks, where he was talking about with an author, and I forget who the author is right now, but the idea that a huge portion of work happens after the law is passed. So often in our narratives, we say that laws that get passed by Congress, that's the end of the fight. But the funny thing is that it is only after the law gets passed that the entire governmental infrastructure begins to implement the law. And that is where so many decisions get made by the people in those structures that actually have to figure out a way to take that law and put it into reaction. And so that the words personnel as policy quite literally mean those that are in the position of power are making decisions that become systemic policies. And this is a classic example of what you're talking about, this critique of the education system. There is no, if you look at the written policies at San Jose State or Foothill or UC Davis or UC Santa Barbara, where does it say we shall leave our most vulnerable students high and dry and let them suffer? Nowhere, I would claim. In fact, there are many places that say the exact opposite, right? We are an equal opportunity campus. And yet, if these, just forget about looking externally, just look on the people in this call. Raise your hand if you had a very psychologically supportive experience in your first few upper division classes, right? And my upper division classes were brutal. I'm not talking about lower division at a community college. That's a different model. I'm talking about, where the bread gets baked, right? And that, you know, Paul Tough is capturing that. And this is one of the reasons that I refuse to, you know, personally, I could not in good spirit know this about this system and then try to go get a UC job. I couldn't do it because I suppose I could have outlasted the tenure, right? So one model of this would be go to a UC, you know, do the postgraduate work, graduate, you know, a postdoctoral fellowship, do it once or twice, eventually get a UC job, do the 7-year tenureship. And then at that point, just be like, okay, fuck you, fuck all you. I was a Trojan horse, right? like now, but the problem is that like daily habits matter, right? Daily habits matter. That you like, we justify. If I put myself in that position, I'm going to justify the trade-offs that I'm making based on the fact that my goal is to get tenure. And if at the age of 40 is the first time that I'm actually saying to myself, okay, now I'm going to engage in this system as if I'm student-centered. Well, guess what? I've lost 15 working years in which I've made these trade-offs. Well, in those 15 years, guess what happened to my mind? I developed working hypothesis on how I should treat students that are actively harmful for students. And this is why I decided when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, that if I was going to go into teaching, I would not do it at the UC, because that I could not, as a single entity, fight the beast. But what I could do is find spaces where the majority of my working life would be dedicated to student success, and then leverage that to build a platform upon which a different model, to offer a different model to other professionals working in this space, right? Yeah. And this is, you know, one of the things that I would say when I hear you talk, Henry, I hear a lot about system navigation. And when you're, you know, this is a power dynamic as much as it is any other thing. Like when we teachers in the class make the policies. As a student, we have Henry has some influence because he can pull strings well, right? But the number of students that are going to get their teachers to read books or change their policies is quite low, right? And so what happens is, necessarily when we're in that supine position, when we're under a hierarchical situation, we almost have to say to ourselves, oh yeah, my teachers are doing the best that they can. Oh, you know, because what other option do you have? You are at the mercy of these people, right? Like you're literally in their classes trying to succeed. What option do you have other than to say what they're doing has to be okay? Because if the moment that you say to yourself, this is fucking bullshit, I am paying this person's, you know, I am paying their salary, and this is the service that I can get better service at, right?
I was going to say you create a Zuckerberg.
Well, yeah, but like it is, in order to survive, you almost have to say that. But one of the things that you guys are seeing, and why I think this is such a powerful space, is if we say that personnel is policy, and you guys are planning to become the personnel of the next generation, the sooner you start to think to yourself, no, it doesn't have to be this way. And then the moment that you think to yourself, I don't have to use the same algorithms that my teachers are using, one of the immediate questions that might come up is, well, if I'm not going to do that, then what do I do? And that's the point of learning, of thinking critically. Like, you know, if I talk about the two major fields of interest that I have for the learning code, it is quite literally learning science, cognitive science, and critical race theory. Learning science allows us to think really critically about what's happening in the brains of our students. Critical race theory centers race as a societal-wide analysis of social structures that impede certain groups of students. Now race is not the only one that does that. So does age, so does sex, so does socioeconomic class, but race is an egregious form of dehumanization in that particular, and it's a form that is externally, you can visually see it externally. And I would say that in the navigation of our college system, racism is baked into so many of the structures of our system that using critical race theory to analyze those structures will allow us to be able to identify the weakness points. And then as we as we develop fluency and agency in the learning theory, we can meld those into a model by which we're able to deconstruct in a very powerful way what students need to succeed regardless of what race they are. And that's important, right? Because my Black students deserve the attention that white students might not deserve, because the larger society endows, projects upon Black students very, very different meanings than they do on white students, right? And if I'm blind to that as instructor, if I treat those two things as the same thing, I'm actually, there's policy again. I am making policy that is race blind, which means I am allowing racism to exist in my practices. Simultaneously, if I can systemically create structures to support students with racism in mind as an insight into larger forms of oppression that exist across different demographics, right? And I can leverage what's happening in the brain of my student, all of a sudden I can make policies in my own classes that address many of the learning needs, both intrapersonal within the mind of my own student and interpersonal within the social constructs that the student navigates on a day-to-day basis. And I can do it regardless of whether or not my administrators and my state funding mechanisms are on board. I can do it with a big, fat hand gesture that allows me to me, meaning us, you guys too, right? To engage with our classes and engage with our students where they are at the time that we meet them. While, the learning code is, not only change, we haven't even talked about the changes that need to happen in the individual classes. You guys have both experienced that as you went through my class, right? And I'm way better now than when we first met each other. But the learning code is assuming that you don't have a professor that's going to do this for you. What are some of the shields you can use against this really what I would call underdeveloped? That's a very generous way to say this. Underdeveloped pedagogy that is actively harmful for students. And the invitation to you two, when we're working on this project, is to get as educated as possible in these fields so that when you go to make your own approaches, when you become policy, right? Because you will become policy, you will become the same policies that Paul Tough is critiquing in that. The moment that you become teachers, you will be enacting policies on students. And my claim is this opportunity, you guys will be training yourself in ways that are not currently available. I am bleeding portions of my career to make this a fact, right? And I would donate this blood once a week at least, right? So that when you become policy, you can actually leverage that. And I love Henry's, this is where I can hear Catherine Lee's voice. And also, when we build a movement is when systems change. And that is super hard, but movements start with people. Movements start individually. And I think so much of the system change, if you wanted my individual opinion, I would say, let them die. I don't mean actively help them die. I mean, many of these people are 30 and above, right? Most of them, maybe even 40 and above or 50 and above. So let's not waste extra time on that generation trying to convince them to change themselves. That's something that they have to decide for themselves. Instead, let's find ways to find the next generation that has not yet become policy and has a sponge mind, just like you guys have, right? And let's find ways to empower those people and show them a better algorithm so that when they get into positions of power, the next generation retires, passes away, has no more influence on the day-to-day. They have influence on the past, but not the present, right? And when that next generation assumes power, hopefully a small subset of those people will have access to a much stronger system upon which to build those decisions. And that's, I think the learning code can fill in there. It is existence and maybe uniqueness, right?
Yeah, I know Steve wants to say something. If once we get better at organizing the meetings ever since our grant started, and just organizing Jeff, think about, you just literally wrote a chapter of a book with your words. I'm not sure if you realize that, right? You
Well,
literally,
one of the things that I hear you say, I know I talk a lot about this stuff privately, right?
right.
And I haven't billed myself as a professional speaker, but I hear you loud and clear, Henry. I hear you that I owe it to myself, and more importantly, let's start with students, right? To broadcast some of these ideas that I've developed over many years, and to really fight for those things, and to do it in a way that when people see externally, they're like, oh, look at that speaker, right? Like, okay, I can do that. That's not, but yes, I agree with you. Like the mechanism, the amount of information that has gone into forming this particular narrative that I've just said is much more than what can be captured in a small amount of time. And I think one of the major critiques that I would have of myself, but really of the system, is I am not paid in a way that I am valued as a philosopher. I am a philosopher. I fucking think about this nonstop. For the last 15 years of my life, I've done nothing other than read, think, and analyze. But on a day-to-day basis, the community college system does not pay me to go on speaking tours. They do not pay me to do podcasts. They don't pay me to write. They pay me to fucking teach. And that's exactly what I do. And I do this in my moonlighting hours. But it drives me so nuts that so many of the voices that I hear in those spaces, I don't know that they've done. Like Mercer, the guy that funded Trump's campaign, he has this opinion that somebody is worth what they make. Literally, he says that teachers are almost worthless because they don't make very much. The amount of value that teachers give to society is close to zero because that's their paycheck, whereas he is worth much more because he's made in the billions. That guy has had that opinion broadcast because of the way that our social capital works. And I hear you loud and clear that if I'm serious about this, I need to find ways to empower others to follow some of the trails that I blazed in my own life, so that they can blaze those trails for themselves also. And I'm there, man. I'm so happy to do that, because ultimately this is about the next generation. It is about you two. I'm talking to you right now, right? Like Steve and Henry, you guys are going to be that next generation. And so if I can help you leverage your minds and leverage the entirety of your humanity to guide not only your education, but when you become that next generation of teachers, to help you do so in a way that would save you a lot of time that I didn't have, right? Like, one of the things that makes me so proud, you guys are fucking writing on a weekly basis before you end on this subject, before you end undergraduate. You realize how powerful that is? I do, because I didn't fucking do that until after grad school. So I can kind of wrap up here, but I hear you loud and clear, and let's do it. Like let's start doing it on a weekly basis. Let's, writing the videos, the meetings that we have, like, and you guys are bringing a lot to this, right? Like that's one of the powerful things. That's one of the themes of the learning code, that when people connect and they start sharing ideas, that's where great things happen. And that's a way to really create mechanisms to go. I think Steve, I should probably go too. I have a shit ton of stuff to do. But
Steve, any final thoughts?
I mean, there's just a lot in that. I don't know if I necessarily have my philosophy exactly narrowed down to like a point. I know, or I don't know if this is like conflicting, but like I know my dad has always tried to install the value of like, we came to this country with like nothing, we worked our way up. So, like anything is possible. Like, don't think of yourself kind of as like handicapped. So I don't know. I know I see that race plays a role in so many things, but then at the same time, I try not to see it and just get by on sheer work ethic. So I don't know, this is kind of conflicting, but I've kind of adopted both of them. I don't know. it's a confusing thing to think about. Yeah.
You're in the development stage. You're still you're trying to process your lived experience in your family with your lived experience in the larger world, right?
Yeah.
It takes time.
All right. The last thing I'll say, Jeff, when I said that you just wrote a chapter with your words, what I meant is we have been doing that for 18 something months, so just realize that you've been doing that and you don't need to do any prep work for presenting something formally, because you have that, I would say, ready to go, and you've been delivering that for us in our meetings for the last year and a half. So I just want
but I also, like, if we think about those 7 points you put up earlier, I have trained myself at this point in my life. I stopped formal training in ToastMasters a while ago, but I've trained myself to be able to hit in live action. There was an example right there. Use pot, like in live action. I can actually think about the mechanism by which I'm speaking and the words that I use to be able to deliver content. And I think that's a very valuable lesson that I can start to leverage in these conversations, both as an example to you guys, because I think you all could do better than I can, right? If I can do it, you can do it better. But also as a way to meet the goals that we have to leverage online videos. Those are things that I would love to empower. I'd love to bring my skill set to bear on behalf of this project, on behalf of you two, on behalf of me, and on behalf of many students in the past and the future that I have yet to serve. And I think from that standpoint, that's where the thoughtfulness or the ability to slow down a little bit comes into play.
Okay. Great. Until next time.
When you guys become teachers, you will do for your students what I have not been able to do for mine as quickly. If I can do anything in my career to make that true, I will. This is a way that I multiply, and you will bring so much of your own reality into that, right? It's not just Jeff Anderson's mechanism. No, this is Steve Silva, Henry Fan. Hopefully many of the ideas that I've played with accelerate your progress. But if the idea is to humanize the experience, having 3 instructors and hopefully an audience outside of that is much better than just having 1, right? You are the dream. You guys are the future. I'm on my way down.
Certainly don't think so.
All right. Hey, so we'll be in contact, Steve. I'll get you some texts and then for some times to meet up, and then the same thing with Henry.
Sounds good.
And then our
All right,
next
guys.
our meetings are going to be at 2 from now or
2:45. Is that okay? Yeah, usually I'll have to leave at 4. Today, the 4 p.m. meeting got canceled, so I was dynamically calculating that.
All right. Sounds good.
And then we'll find ways to. All right. See you guys.